There's a fella I watched once, out on the launch down home. Brand new rod, brand new reel, still had the tag hanging off it. And he reared back to make his first cast of the day, and, I swear to you, the line just exploded off that reel into a nest so big and so ugly, you couldn't have untangled it with a week and a pot of coffee. And he stood there, looking at it. And then he looked around to see if anybody saw, and then he packed up his whole truck and left. Never made a second cast. Went home thinking he was no good at fishing. He wasn't no good at fishing. He just had the wrong reel in his hand for where he was in his fishing, and nobody ever told him the difference. That's the saddest thing on the water to me. A man quitting before he ever started, over a thing nobody explained to him. My name is Bo Landry. I've been guiding folks on the bayous and lakes down here in Louisiana most of my life, and before that, my grandpère put my first rod in my hands when I was hardly tall enough to see over the gunwale, and I've fished every kind of reel there is. I've got a whole rack of them in the shed. So today, I'm going to do for you what nobody did for that fella at the launch. I'm going to walk you through the 3 kinds of reels, plain and simple, how each one works, how you cast it, and, most important, which one belongs in your hands right now, wherever you are in your fishing. Because there's no shame in any of these 3. There's just the right one for you today. Let's get into it. First, what a reel even is. Before we name the 3, let me tell you the one thing a reel does. Because if you understand that, the rest makes sense on its own. A reel does 2 jobs. It lets your line go out when you cast, fast and clean, and it brings your line back in when you're reeling or when you've got a fish on. That's it. Everything else, the drag, the handle, the fancy knobs, all of it is just about controlling those 2 things. Line going out, line coming in. Every reel ever made is just a different answer to the same question. How do we let the line run without it turning into a bird's nest? Keep that in your head, because the 3 kinds of reels are really just 3 different trades. Each one gives you something and asks something back. Let me show you. The spin cast reel, the one that forgives you. Let's start where most folks ought to start, and that's the spin cast reel. That's the one with the closed nose on the front, looks like a little dome with a hole in it, and a push button on the back. You've seen them. Half of us caught our first fish on one, me included. Here's how you cast it, and it could not be simpler. You press the button down with your thumb and hold it. You bring the rod back, you swing it forward, and about halfway through you just let go of the button. That's it. The line comes out the little hole, your bait sails out, and when it lands, you turn the handle and you're reeling. 1 button. That's the whole thing. That's why it's the reel you put in a child's hands or a beginner's, 'cause there's near about nothing to mess up. Now here's the trade, 'cause every reel's got one. All the parts on a spin cast are tucked up inside that closed dome, and there's a lot of little points in there where the line rubs as it comes out. All that rubbing is friction, and friction is a break. So a spin cast just naturally can't cast very far, and it won't cast as accurate as the others. The reel's fighting the line the whole way out. And that same closed dome that protects the guts from dirt, it also traps water in there with your wet line, and give it enough time, that moisture will rust the insides. And you don't want to put heavy line on one. Anything much over 10-pound test, and your casting distance just falls off a cliff. So the spin cast is the reel that forgives you everything while you learn, and I love it for that. I keep a couple in the shed for when I take my kids and their little friends out, but it's a reel to start on, not to stay on. Once your thumb knows what it's doing, you're going to want more reel than this, which brings us to the one I'd steer most grown folks toward. One more thing while we're here, 'cause it'll save you grief on any of these 3. The line you spool up matters near as much as the reel. On a beginner reel like this, do yourself a favor and use monofilament, the plain stretchy stuff, not the braid. Mono's cheaper. It forgives a bad. Not better, and that little bit of stretch in it works like a shock absorber when a fish hits. It's a lot harder to snap off on. The fancy braided line's got its place, but it's got no stretch, and it'll dig into a soft spool and cause you headaches you don't need while you're still learning. Start with mono. Grandpere fished mono his whole life, and he caught more than his share. The spinning reel, the one that does near about everything, the spinning reel. If you only ever own one reel your whole life, this is the one, and I'll tell you plain why. It does more things well than any other reel there is. Beginners use 'em. Old salts with 40 years on the water use 'em. You can catch a little bitty bluegill on a small one and a giant catfish, or a saltwater bruiser on a big one. It's the most versatile tool in the whole boat. You know it by how it hangs. A spinning reel bolts to the underside of the rod and hangs down below it. The others all sit on top, but this one hangs under. And that little wire arm that flips over the spool, that's the bail. Remember that word, bail, 'cause it's the whole key to casting one. Here's how you cast it. You reach up with your index finger and you hook the line against the rod. Just pin it there with your fingertip. Then you flip that bail open with your other hand. Now the line's only being held by your finger. You make your cast, and about halfway through the swing, you just lift your finger, and off she goes, long and smooth and straight, 'cause there's nothing in there fighting the line the way a spin cast does. Bait hits the water, you flip the bail back over, and you're reeling. Finger, bail, cast, lift, flip. Do it a dozen times in the yard and it'll be second nature, and I mean that. Do it in the yard before you ever get to the water. Tie a little casting weight or an old lure with the hooks cut off on the end. Go out in the grass and just practice putting it where you want it. Pick a spot, a bucket, a bare patch, whatever, and cast at it till you can drop the weight near it 3 times out of 5. Half an hour of that in the backyard and you'll step onto the launch already knowing what you're doing, instead of learning in front of everybody with the fish watching. The timing of when you lift that finger is the whole thing, and it's a lot easier to learn over grass than over water. Grandpere never let me fish a new reel till I'd thrown it in the yard first. Couple things worth knowing. The drag. That's the thing that lets a big fish pull line out so he don't snap you off. On most spinning reels, that's a little dial right on top you can turn. And the sizes go by thousands. 1,000 size is a itty-bitty reel for light line and little fish. A 3 or 4,000 is your all-around bass and catfish size, and they go clear up to 18,000 for the big saltwater monsters. Some companies number them different. Pfluger will call the small one a 20 and a bigger one a 35 or 40, but it's the same idea. Little number, little reel, big number, big reel. And let me tell you how to set that drag, 'cause most folks never do, and it costs some fish. You want the drag tight enough to set a hook, but loose enough that a big pull slips line instead of snapping it. Here's the way Grandpere showed me. No fancy gauge needed. Tie your line off, hold the rod up like you've got a fish on, and pull the line straight out by hand. You ought to be able to strip line off with a good steady tug, but not too easy. If you can't pull any line at all, it's too tight, and a big fish will break you off. If it slips out with hardly no effort, it's too loose, and you'll never sink a hook. Set it so it fights you a little. That's the whole trick. And it's the difference between landing the fish of your life and telling a sad story about him. Now, the one trade on a spinning reel is a thing called line twist. Your line starting to curl and kink up on itself. But here's the good news, and this is the part I want you to hear. Line twist is mostly your own doing, which means it's mostly in your power to prevent. 2 rules, and you'll near about never see it. Rule 1, and Grandpere drilled this into me: never crank the handle while a fish is pulling drag off the reel. When that drag's slipping and singing, stop turning the handle, Every single turn you make while the line's going out the other way is wind and twist into your line, and one day it all comes back to bite you as a big, ugly knot. Let him run, then reel when he stops. Rule 2. If you're throwing a bait that spins, like a spoon or an inline spinner, tie a little swivel into your rig. That swivel spins, so your line don't have to. That's the whole cure. Do those two things and the spinning reel's only real weakness just about disappears. The bait caster, the one you grow into. Now the third one, the bait caster. Specifically the low-profile kind that sits down in the palm of your hand. And I want to be honest with you about this one, the way I'd want somebody to be honest with me. 'Cause honest is better than impressive. The bait caster is a wonderful reel. It sits on top of the rod, it handles heavy line beautiful, and it's strong. When I'm hauling a big bass up out of thick brush or a mat of vegetation, this is the reel I want, 'cause it's got the muscle to winch him out before he wraps me around a stump. The serious fella tends to carry both this and a spinning reel and reach for whichever the day calls for, but it asks more of you than the other two. And here's the trade. You know that nest of line I told you about at the very start, the one that ran that fella off the lake? That's a backlash. Some folks call it a bird's nest. And the bait caster is the reel that gives it to you. Here's why it happens. On a bait caster, the spool itself spins as the line flies off. And when your bait slows down at the end of a cast, that spool wants to keep spinning anyhow. And now it's throwing out line faster than the bait's taking it. And all that extra line piles up into a nest right there on the reel. Now that sounds scary, but listen, it's controllable, and it's controlled with your thumb. As the bait's flying out, you feather your thumb against that spinning spool, just a light touch, and right as the bait's about to land, you press down and stop it. Your thumb is the brake, and the reel's got knobs to help you. A tension knob and a braking system that you set up so the spool don't run wild. Here's the part folks forget, and it's the biggest cause of backlash there is. You got to reset those knobs every time you tie on a heavier or a lighter bait. A reel set for a heavy lure will backlash the second you throw a light one. Set it for what's tied on, feather your thumb, and you'll be all right. I'll tell you true, though. Even fellas who've fished 40 years still throw a backlash now and again, especially casting into a wind. So don't you ever let one embarrass you. It ain't a sign you're bad. It's just the price this particular reel charges for its power. The bait caster's the most expensive of the three, and it wants the most looking after too. It's a reel to grow into, not to start on. And here's a little trick that'll take most of the fear out of it when your day does come. 'Cause I don't want you scared off a good reel. Before you ever cast a bait caster the first time, set that spool tension knob the easy way. Tie your lure on, hold the rod out level, and let the lure drop toward the ground on its own. If it plummets and the reel nests up, the spool's too free. Snug the knob down. If it won't fall at all, it's too tight. You want it set so the lure sinks slow and steady to the ground, and the spool stops on its own when it lands. Set it right there, and you've taken the meanest part of the backlash out before you even swing. Then it's just your thumb doing the fine work. Do that every time you change lures, and a bait caster turns from a bird's nest machine into the sweetest cast and reel you own. Which one goes in your hand? So there's your three. And here's where I earn my keep. 'Cause I'm not going to do what the tackle catalog does and tell you to buy the priciest one and feel like a big shot. I'm going to tell you what actually belongs in your hand. If you have never fished a day in your life, or you're putting a rod in a child's hands, start with a spin cast. Let it forgive you while your thumb learns the timing. There's no shame in it, and it'll catch just as many fish while you learn. For just about everybody else, get yourself a spinning reel, a 3,000 or 4,000 size, and honestly, you could fish the rest of your life and never truly need another reel. It'll do 90% of everything you'll ever want to do. If I could only hand you one, that's the one. And the bait caster, you'll know when it's time. When you find yourself fishing heavy cover for big fish and wishing you had more muscle, that's the fish telling you it's time to grow into a bait caster. Not a day before. You hear what I did there? I never once told you the answer was in the most expensive reel, 'cause it ain't. That's the thing they'll never put in the catalog. There's no money in telling a beginner that a cheap reel and a little practice is most of the whole game, but it's the truth. The reel don't catch the fish. You catch the fish. The reel just needs to not get in your way while you do it. So, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me what reel you're fishing right now, and if you got a question about any of them, ask it. I read every single one.